Are you ready to untangle from your past, recover from heartbreak, and revive your life? This is Soul CPR with your host, Ann Papayoti. We've all had soul-crushing experiences and lost ourselves in our pain, but there is a way out. On this podcast, Amazon best-selling author, award-winning life coach, and advice columnist Ann Papayoti helps us navigate the path from heartbreak to healing. So now, please welcome the host of Soul CPR, Ann Papayoti.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in today. Today's show is a second go at one that we started last week, and as live shows go, sometimes something happens, something interrupts. And last week it was a storm in New York where the studios are located, and we lost power. So I'm very blessed that my guests can rejoin me this week as we are honoring our friend Sandra Ingram, whom we lost last year to colon cancer. So Sandra and I had actually started kind of a new phase in our relationship as coach and client shortly before she succumbed to her illness. Yet much was revealed in that short time together that's been on my heart to share with you. So joining me is our mutual friend, Sharlene Evans, and she is perhaps Sandra's closest friend, is someone who would know her journey best. So Sharlene, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me to honor Sandra.
Thanks, Ann. I appreciate you inviting me to be here to honor our mutual friend.
Oh, of course. Thank you so much. And I see you're wearing yellow today, and tell us about that.
Yes, I'm wearing yellow because that, of course, we all love orange and blue. We have
Right.
that connection, but yellow was Sandra's favorite color. So
Oh,
that's just another way that I felt like I wanted to honor her today.
beautiful. I often think of people's personalities in terms of color, and I think that if we were to describe Sandra's personality, I think it would probably be yellow. Just that bright optimism that people often would describe her and her smile. I think yellow might be a color descriptive for her. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, let's go back to that orange and blue that you brought up because we all met at Auburn. We're all three Alabama natives from three different cities, different parts of the state, yet we all wound up choosing Auburn University. So tell me about how you and Sandra actually met at Auburn.
Well, it's an interesting story because Sandra and I actually met before we started school at Auburn. We both attended a summer engineering program at Auburn. It was the summer between our junior and senior years in high school. We came and we did this 2 week program on Auburn's campus. The purpose was to, introduce us to engineering as a potential major and career choice. And we spent 2 weeks on campus, had a great time. We all bonded. And then, we kind of all went back to high school to finish our senior year. Well, Sandra initially did not have intentions of attending Auburn. I did. I left Auburn thinking this was the place for me. So, but because of different circumstances, we both ended up registering late for that fall quarter. We were all on the quarter system back then. And Sandra had changed her mind and was not coming to Auburn. She was registering late. And we reunited in the long lines at late registration. Um, so I think, being both, on campus, not knowing anybody, it was so wonderful to see a familiar face. And we immediately gravitated to each other and remained friends for decades. So that's
That's
where it started. We eventually became roommates after our freshman year. And, I think a lot of people will say where you saw one, you typically saw the other.
absolutely. I don't think I could say your names without saying them together. In my time at Auburn, it was always Sandra and Sharlene or Sharlene and Sandra. And then we all met by being selected as hostesses for the athletic department. We were known as Tigerettes. And
Yes.
I remember our meetings were held there in the lobby of the athletic department offices. And I remember meeting you girls there, and then we all became friends. And Dan, we've got a picture of a group of us in our orange and blue. Do you have picture number one we can show the audience today? There we are. Okay. So for those of you who are watching this rather than just listening, that I drew arrows on this picture. Sandra's the top right back, and then Charlene's in the middle, and there I am on the front row with hair inspired by, I think it was going to be Olivia Newton-John, Let's Get Physical album back then. Did you have a hair inspiration, Charlene?
I don't think I did, although sometimes I look back and wonder. I don't know that there was any like real inspiration. It was just kind of like whatever. Uh,
Whatever. Oh my
yes,
goodness. Well, I had Joanna Watley, who was a tigerette with us, was on the show recently as well. We were reminiscing on tigerettes and also our hair choices back then. So I had to ask you, of
yes.
course. And then we've got a picture, Dan, if you have number two, we've got a close up of Sharlene and Sandra together where we can truly see the colors of that orange and blue. And that was orange polyester. It was not, it did not breathe.
No,
Those,
it did not. I still think
it
about
did
us
not.
wearing those polyester suits on those hot game days.
Oh, I am telling you, and we did it, but we wore them well, and y'all looked beautiful in
And we
those.
wore
But
them proudly. We wore them proudly.
we wore them proudly, and we wore pantyhose back in those days.
That's right. That's right.
Polyester suits, did we not? Yes, we did. Oh my goodness. All right, so with this long relationship and friendship that you had with Sandra and becoming roommates at Auburn, and I can think back on Auburn and there's so many fond memories. I'm sure you have a favorite memory or story that you could share from having been roommates, perhaps.
Yes, so many adventures as you can imagine. You think about everybody's college days. We all did some probably really interesting things together. But as roommates, back when we were at Auburn, if you will recall, it was pretty popular to live in a trailer park.
Yeah, that's
you know,
where all the
we,
cool kids lived. Yeah.
yes, yes. You think about it now, and you tell the kids there, and they're like, "What? You live in a trailer park?" But we did, and we were very excited. We had this brand new trailer. We lived together, and one time, one day, I get this phone call out of the blue, and it's from this guy. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, how did you get my number?" I found out that Sandra had given him my phone number. I was not
Mhm.
too pleased about that. So I decided that I would just lock her out of the house. I would lock her out of our place. So I actually got a plastic bag. I put some of her things in it and I sat it outside the door and I locked the door from the inside so that she could not get in. And so she comes home and she's like, "What did I do? What did I do?" I was like, "You gave that guy my phone number. You knew better." And it has been one of those stories that she loved. Of course, she exaggerated over the years because I really didn't keep her out there that long. But we have laughed about that for many a time. She was like, "Yeah, she was my roommate, but she kicked me out."
I'm sure that has been a great story to tell. Well, after Auburn, I'm sure you have many more, but we will talk off air about some more of those because I have memories of visiting you girls at the trailer because I wasn't cool enough to live out there, but I loved it because we would cook and y'all would grill out and stuff, and we have parties out there, and it was fun, and we were well behaved at our parties, of course,
We
but
were, we were.
we were. Um, so after Auburn, I know your career paths took you on different directions, but tell me how you stayed connected in your personal life.
Well, we stayed connected just, from the time we left Auburn, until her last days. Many phone calls. She started to work for Delta Airlines. I was an engineer. I went to graduate school and then started my career in Indianapolis, Indiana. She was a flight attendant. Wherever I was, she typically would, make sure there was some layovers and we would visit. And I would come visit her in Atlanta. She was there for most of her career before moving to Chicago when she started working for United. There were many visits in Chicago as well. So we just made that effort, lots of late nights on the phone call, what's going on in your life. Of course, we always had the dating stories that we had to compare, and, just whatever was going on in our lives, we always shared, and, we always stayed in touch. So it was a
Yeah.
really special friendship.
Yeah. And then you got married
I
and
did.
you had and had a child, and she was a part of that as well. And I think we have a picture. Dan, do you have the next picture? She helped host your baby shower, right? Or hostess. Yeah.
This
That's
is
from your baby shower, right?
bridal shower, my bridal shower.
Your bridal shower. Yeah,
Yeah.
bridal shower. Say if you were had a baby, look at you. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Bridal
Well,
shower.
I would only wish that I could look like that if I had a baby, but
Yeah. Look, the bridal shower. Oh, that's beautiful.
yeah, she hosted that. She was living in Atlanta, and she hosted my bridal shower at her home. And again, she was. I had two a maid and a matron of honor. She and my sister, and it was important for her to be a part of that. That special day with me and that whole process. So
Oh,
yeah.
that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Well, Sandra and my lives did parallel post Auburn because I also worked for Delta, as you know. I was also a flight attendant, and then she went into training before I did, and then I went into training. But we were in two different sections of the training and development world. And then she went on into flight safety, and then developed an amazing career in that arena. And I went into um, community affairs and global diversity. And then I think I left Atlanta and Delta and moved on to Montreal, where I kind of reinvented my life and my career and do what I do now, basically. And before she moved on to with United to Chicago, but she would come and visit because she would have business there. Because it just so happens that in Montreal are two international aviation organizations. It's ICOA and IATA are there, the International Civil Aviation Organization and the International Air Transport Association. I don't know if I said those right, but the two major, and she would have meetings in there. So when she would have business, she would reach out and we would try to meet up. And so I've got a picture of her at United and a picture of her visiting me. And I love these two pictures. Dan, if you can show these things. See that laugh? That is so her with her head back and that just reminds me of her so big, that smile and that laugh. There's her, there's Sandra at United. And then we've got a picture of her. There we are visiting when she came to see me in Montreal. And this is the last time I saw her before in person before she became ill. But I love that picture and those memories of that
Mhm.
visit. And on one of these visits to Montreal, Sharlene, she shared something else that had changed in her life besides starting with United and moving. She had moved to Wisconsin, I believe, and she had found love. So tell
Yes.
me a little about that part of her life, if you will.
Well, that was really such a exciting time in her life. I think she had wanted to find love and wanted to find someone she could share her life with, and she met Bruce. They met. He happened to live in Wisconsin. She was still working in Chicago, but they connected, and she ended up moving there to be with him. We would always give her a hard time, and I would joke with her. I'm like, "That's some serious love for you to make that commute from Wisconsin to downtown Chicago." But she did it, and they formed a really special relationship. And Bruce was there, to the very end. He was with her to the very end, and was a incredible support system for her.
Right. And we're going to talk about support systems and the importance of those and how she utilized not only her support systems, but also really truly who she was to get through her illness in the next system. So let's take a moment before that and just describe Sandra. Some things about her. We mentioned her smile, that I think infectious smile she had. We mentioned describing her as the color yellow,
Mhm.
um, optimistic and vivacious. Is there any other words you would use to describe
Oh,
Sandra?
strong. Sandra was incredibly strong, very positive. I mean, perseverance comes to mind, when I think about her in terms of, especially what she demonstrated through her fight. But,
Hmm.
she had a heart of gold. She loved people. She loved giving. She was a great friend. If you needed her, she was going to be there. I think all those things
All
really
those.
are Sandra.
Beautiful. Well, it is time for our first break. I think that's the perfect segue. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about Sandra's story, her life, her health journey, and all of these traits that helped her through it. So don't go far. We'll be back with more Soul CPR.
Mike Zoric, a three-time California state champion in Greco-Roman wrestling at 114 pounds. Mike, blind since birth, was born in Hartford, Connecticut. He was a six-time national placer, including 2 seconds, 2/3, and 2/4. He also won the Veterans Folk-Style Wrestling twice at 152 pounds. In all these tournaments, he was the only blind competitor. Nancy Zoric, a creative spirit whose talents have taken her to the stage and into galleries and exhibitions in several states. Her father, a commercial artist who shared his instruments with his daughter and helped her fine-tune her natural abilities, influenced her decision to follow in his footsteps. Ms. Zoric has enjoyed a fruitful career doing what she loves. Listen Saturday mornings at 12 Eastern for the Nancy and Mike Show for heartwarming stories and interesting talk on the BBM Global Network.
Are you struggling to care for elderly parents or a spouse? Do you wonder if being a caregiver is making you sick? Are you worried about taking time off work to care for elderly parents and balance work, life, and caregiving? Has caregiving become exhausting and emotionally draining? Are you an aging adult who wants to remain independent, but you're not sure how? I'm Pamela D. Wilson. Join me for the Caring Generation radio show for caregivers and aging adults, Wednesday evenings, 6 Pacific, 7 Mountain, 8 Central, and 9 Eastern, where I answer these questions and share tips for managing stress, family relationships, health, well-being, and more. Podcasts and transcripts of the Caring Generation are on my website, PamelaDWilson.com, plus my caregiving library, online caregiver support programs, and programs for corporations interested in supporting working caregivers. Help, hope, and support for caregivers is here on the Caring Generation and PamelaDWilson.com.
Welcome back to Soul CPR right here on Bold Brave TV, everyone. I'm Ann Papayotti, and joining me today is Sharlene Evans, and we are honoring our friend Sandra Ingram, who passed to colon cancer. So we're up through her story. She's got this stellar career in aviation, and she has found love. She's willing to commute from Wisconsin to Chicago, and we are just getting up to the point where she was diagnosed. So, Charlene, when was she first diagnosed?
So her journey started 7 years ago, um, when she was diagnosed. I think like all of us, you get caught up in your busy life, and you may notice some things that are specific but yet not specific, and you're like, okay, but you just kind of ignore it, and you sometimes also put off those routine screenings that we need to do, and she did all of that. But there was a point where she realized that something's not quite right. And then she went into the doctor. That resulted in her being scheduled for a colonoscopy. And she was diagnosed with colon cancer, and late stage colon cancer at that.
Yeah,
Her initial diagnosis really, she was provided a life expectancy of less than 2 years at that point, which I think is one of the reasons that I think we're here today, is because that 2 years turned into 7. And it's because of her journey and who she was. And, I know we'll be talking a bit about what was it about her and the things that she did that allowed her to basically have all of that extra time.
that's right. That's right. So, how did she first tell you? I'm sure that is stamped in your memory.
Yeah, well, I knew she was going in, for the colonoscopy, and it was just, Sandra is pretty straightforward as well. She just kind of blurted it out. And, I was a little stunned. It was over the phone, of course, because we were in different places, and I just really didn't know what to say. It was kind of unbelievable. And then when she shared her prognosis, that was really just crushing, right? It was just heartbreaking to think about that. But then, it's interesting because even with her delivering that news, it wasn't like she accepted it. Then it was really more about, okay, that's what they say, but here's what we can do, right?
Yeah.
And that was her, right? She
Yeah.
didn't let us wallow in it. She was always positive. She never felt sorry for herself through it all. And it was really about the action, the focus on what can I do. And I
Yeah.
think that's what helped myself as well as, those, others around her through this journey to really just get on board and say, okay, what are we going to do? And let's go do it.
And let's go do it. I had That's something I had written down about her was she was a doer.
Mhm,
Just a doer.
mhm,
Get
mhm,
it done, find a
mhm.
way, do it. And I know in my notes from the session that we had together before she became ill was she said, I'm going to follow my medical prognosis, but it doesn't mean I accept it. She had said that
Yeah.
she and she said, I'm going to follow advice, but I'm still going to believe in a higher power. So, and what could also assist me in that way. So, what role did her faith play in her
Yes, and
journey?
that's definitely something that I wanted to talk about because, I think it's just her do it attitude and positivity, but her faith played a very significant role, in her journey. She just always believed, that, hey, I'm going to keep that faith. I'm going to continue to pray. I'm going to continue to, do my part, but also believe that, our higher power is also doing his part.
Yeah, yeah. I heard that in her even when we met. She had just received some medical news the day before where they were no longer going to be treating her. They were just going to keep her comfortable. And
Mhm.
she was like, "That's okay, but my higher power might have a different prognosis for me." She was still like, I'm still holding on to something that may be different than what they're saying. So I'm always curious because when we hear about celebrities, whether they're open or not about an illness. So, like Kate Middleton recently, she eventually shared she had cancer, but she still didn't share what type, right?
Mhm.
And then we had learned about, of course, Chadwick Boseman, the star of the popular film Black Panther, who lost his life at the young age of 43 to this same cancer, but he kept it hidden well for 4 years, kept it to a tight circle. So I know certain cancers and maybe cancer in general is a very personal battle for some people. How open was Sandra in talking about her illness with others?
Well, I think for so long she kept within a pretty tight circle. Um,
Mhm.
Sandra, she loves people. She's vivacious. She was all of these things, but she also had a pretty tight inner circle. And that she really, the people that she really trusted and cared for and knew that she could count on. And I think for so long she wanted to keep it within that circle. And I think I think the faith probably played a role in that because she was like, okay, wait a minute, I'm not giving into this, so I don't want people around me to, to really take that focus off the fight that I know I'm going to have, but also knowing that I'm going to get through this. And so
Right.
for a long time, she didn't share it broadly. I think toward the end, she did. She talked about it a lot more with a lot more people. I think over time she wanted to make sure that she could share her experiences, share her learnings. And I know probably in her conversations with you, there were some things that she really had wanted to do to even broaden the impact that she thought that she could potentially have. So I think that the sharing of her illness and her, because if you looked at Sandra, you would never have known what she was going through. That was the most incredible, amazing part to me. And this was almost to the end. She
Yeah.
didn't look sick. You know how we think people look sick? She
Mhm.
never did. And so if you looked at her, you would never know the struggle that she was going through or the challenges that she was overcoming. And she did overcome so many. So I think that was probably part of it as well. She didn't feel the need to explain because outwardly, unless you were close to her, you really didn't know what she was dealing with.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, again, I think it's such a personal journey. And for whatever reason that people may keep their illness to themselves, and whether I know my mom did this, she didn't, she would keep, she had a mastectomy and didn't tell me till it was done. And part of it was she didn't want to worry me, or she didn't want I if she didn't want any influence in a decision, I don't know, or whatever it may be. But it was always also, I think part of it, my mom was very much like Sandra, and that she was a believer and she was a doer, and she was going to do what she had to do, and then this was going to be done with, and it was going to be okay.
Hmm.
And just get rid of that stuff and take care of it, and it's gonna, and I'll do my part and whatever. But also, not to burden people was a big piece of my mom's. And unfortunately my mom succumbed to a different cancer later in life, 11 days from diagnosis to her passing. And so there wasn't time, and I'm glad that I was with her when she passed. But bottom line is, I think people are very different with how they approach this. But I did see Sandra wasn't one to post this on Facebook. I'll put it that way. There wasn't a post on Facebook. Eventually, she did share with me privately in a post, and or in a message, and we started having those private little conversations about it. But they were still few and far between until I saw her at our reunion, and that's when I had that opportunity to see her. But in and that was the wider circle that opened up, right? With her Tigerette family, at least, is when maybe once she started sharing with them, is when I got to also know her message. And we had a reunion in September of 2022. And that's when I wasn't sure she was going to be able to make it or travel. And she had expressed that to me, but she did make it. And she was able to come. Many of us were blessed to visit with her. She wasn't well by then, and I know she had to leave the event, go to the hospital. I believe you were with her, Sharlene, through that, and she missed the game because of that. But we had the opportunity to be with her for a short time before that. And we have a picture of the group. Dan, if you don't mind showing that next picture, when she was smiling with us earlier. And by now she's on a lot of medication, and we know that she is dealing with it. And she's on the front left corner there, and I'm on the far right corner, and Charlene, you're hiding in the middle. But
Somewhere in the middle.
yeah, hiding in the middle. But
Yeah,
that's some of
she
our
was determined to be there. I guess one of the words that I hadn't used to describe her, and I say this lovingly, was stubborn. Because but I think that's that tenacity and stubbornness just fueled her, and she was determined to come because she wanted to see all of you. She wanted to be there and to see everybody. I encouraged her, oh, I don't know if you should come, but she was going to be there, and she did. And I was, even with the challenges that she had that weekend while she was there, looking back, I'm so happy that she came and that she had that time, and I know how important it was to her.
oh, I'm so glad that she was able to make it. I hated that she was ill, but or became ill from the medication that she was on, and left. But Sue, our fearless leader that we like to talk about and give credit, who taught us how to walk and talk take our jackets off, cross our legs like a lady, and all those things that we had to do in our polyester suits. And to be the hostesses for the university, had that opportunity to see her as well, and so many of our Tigrette sisters in that photograph there, and others. That was just a little sampling. The reunion was huge, but who were very happy to get to spend some time and see Sandra at that moment. So she texted me after that reunion and an update on her health. This is what led to that next phase in our relationship. She texted me an update, and she was so ecstatic. She was like, she was getting off chemo, and she saw that this was an opportunity for her to regain her stamina and her strength. And her words were, quote, "To say I'm turned up is an understatement." Exactly. Yeah, to say I'm turned up is an understatement. And we have a picture of you with her when she got to ring the bell that was signaling that her chemo was complete. Is that right? So with that signal,
This was only one round. I mean, this
okay.
this was an early round when we were there. So the four of us, her, some of her closest friend, and
Mhm.
then you have Bruce, who's right there on the end,
I was
in
gonna
front of
ask, is that Bruce? Okay, I didn't get to meet Bruce, but
that
I
is,
saw a
that is
picture.
Bruce, and then in
Yeah.
front of Bruce is, I mean, her childhood friend. They grew up next door to each other, so she's known her
Oh,
um, way, way back. And then there's Katrina next to her, who she met at Delta as well. And then
okay.
on the end, of course, Regina, whom she also met at Delta. But we all traveled to Wisconsin to be there for her to ring the bell, and she was so ecstatic that day. As I said, though, unfortunately, that was one of many rounds of chemo that she endured over those 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I love that picture. I loved, and that was her inner circle, that group of women. That really was her support system, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I know I've had other guests on the show who was dealing with melanoma, and we talked about the importance of a support system, no matter how small or how large. A support system is key, I believe, in people's ability to cope with and to have those overcoming success stories of whatever level and whatever challenges that show up in their treatment journey. And what a blessing that group of women were for Sandra. I know. It's time for our second break, so we will take a pause here and come back in just a bit and talk more about Sandra's journey and her message for all of us. So don't go far, and we'll be back with more Soul CPR.
Dr. RC will share extraordinary resources and services that promote educational success, as well as making a difference in the lives of all social workers, as well as the lives of children, adolescents, and teens of today. She will have open discussions addressing many of the issues that we face about our youth and how being employed in the uniquely skilled profession of social work for over 18 years has taught invaluable lessons through her personal experiences. She will also provide real-life facts, examples, and personal stories that will confirm that why serving as a child advocate is extremely beneficial when addressing the needs of the whole child. Listen live to Dare to Soar, Saturdays, 10 a.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network, and tune in radio as Dr. RC will provide thought-provoking information that will empower, encourage, and strengthen students, families, and communities across our nation. You can also visit her at soarwithkatie.com. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back, everyone, to the show. We are talking about our dear friend Sandra Ingram today and her journey with colon cancer. And it was right after that Tigerette reunion that we were just showing photos of that Sandra had reached out to me and was really eager to get started working as coach and client. I think her eagerness was greater than her strength at that time, Sharlene, because it took her a while still to get started. But once we did, I think it's what you alluded to earlier was I think she started feeling maybe that pressure of time, maybe that limitation to start having a voice where she had remained maybe a bit more silent before. She told me she wanted to get some key messages out to others, and she told me she didn't have time to sugarcoat it. And I'm using her words exactly. And sadly, she did not have that time. And it can be summed up in these words. She wanted awareness, action, and advocacy. And you and I talked about that a little bit when we were talking about how to honor her. And this was for herself. And this is the journey, part of her journey that you're very aware of, that she did this for herself. And she wanted to be able to communicate this to others so that they would do these things for themselves too. And then she wanted to have a role in this. So let's talk about each of these. Awareness for self. Let's start with that. So Sharlene, when you think of Sandra and her legacy of awareness, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I think it's specifically for, for her illness, she did start to raise that awareness with others, right? I mean, she would, amongst us, and I, heard others who might not have been quite as close, but did you go in for your colonoscopy?
Yeah,
Don't ignore the signs when something doesn't seem quite right. I mean, I think she acknowledges the things that she might not have done, that she didn't want others to make that same mistake. So, anywhere that she could raise the awareness around the things that could make a difference, then she tried to do that. And I know she did it. I mean, one of our friends in particular, Regina, she really hounded her, get that colonoscopy schedule, until she finally did it. And she did, right? And so, those were things that were important. And she did that, as I said, within her inner circle. And I know that, she tried to do that in other places where she felt like she could have an impact.
absolutely. Um, and as you said before, we get so busy in our lives and we might downplay a symptom. My mom said she did this in her final cancer that took her life. You ignore a sign, you put off a test. So let's talk about awareness when it comes to colon cancer. Know the symptoms, know your risks, know that your lifestyle choices matter. And this is something that I promise to speak about on the show. So, what are the symptoms of colon cancer? I'm going to go through them real quick. Abdominal discomfort, maybe pain, aches, cramps, bloating, something out of the ordinary, a change in bowel habits, constipation, diarrhea, or a feeling that the bowel doesn't fully empty, blood in or on the stool, unexplained weight loss. Now, all of these could be symptoms of something else. However, these are signs that you should be aware of, are possibilities, and therefore you should have a screening. The thing is that colorectal cancer doesn't always cause symptoms. That's, again, another reason why screenings are so important. What are risk factors? Well, you should know your family history. First and foremost, you should know if there are any genetic syndromes in your family that make you high risk. Um, if you've ever had any precancerous polyps yourself from a previous screening, then you're at a higher risk. If you have any inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis, then you're at a higher risk level. Uh, lifestyle choices matter. So lifestyle changes can reduce our risk. So prevention. So when it comes to awareness, it can be knowing that this is what they preach for pretty much any cancer and any healthy health habit would be to eat a variety of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, vitamins, minerals, fiber, antioxidants, range of nutrients is what we need. And our Western diet is a curse in many ways because it's low fiber, high fat, and calories, which, helped us from starving, but it's hurting us in another way, right? Don't
Absolutely.
smoke, alcohol in moderation, maintain a healthy weight, exercise regularly, know your family history, discuss your risk with a doctor, get screened as recommended, which is now 45 years old through 75 years of age. Older than 75 depends on other risk factors. Unless you're deemed high risk, it might be earlier than 45 because they're diagnosing earlier and earlier and earlier. Sadly, as we mentioned, the actor
Yeah.
Chadwick Boseman was diagnosed in his late 30s. So all of those things. So awareness was one thing. Action was the other thing we talked about. Oh, well, from Sandra. So get screened, right? Let me just go through the screening list and then let's talk about Sandra's action.
Yeah.
Screenings. Colonoscopy, you mentioned, is how her cancer was discovered, right? So colonoscopy is considered the gold standard of screenings because polyps can be discovered and removed during this test, and they can view the entire colon and rectum. Then there's your basic fecal blood test, which checks for blood in the stool. There's a stool DNA test that looks for changes in cells and precancerous conditions and signs of blood in the stool. Then there's also the virtual colonoscopy, which sounds great, but guess what? They still insert a catheter while they do something like a CT scan, and you still have to prep and cleanse. So, which one's the best one for any of us is the one we'll do, right, Charlene? And I think that's when I was talking to Sandra, it's like the best one's the one we'll do because a lot of people have attitudes about these kind of tests or they have hangups about it. We need to get over them and do them.
Yeah.
And I think that would be one thing she would say to all of us: get over it and do it. She's the doer. This
That's
is
right.
something. Control the controllables, lifestyle, getting our screenings,
Getting the
control the.
screening.
So what else? So when it comes action, when it comes to mind about Sandra, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I think about specifically what she did for herself, right? She took action. As she told you, I'm going to follow the directions that I'm given, and she did. I mean, she followed the directions, but she was also very proactive in terms of actions. Do I need a second opinion here?
Mhm.
What do I need to do? If you're telling me here are the possibilities, what do I need to do to be able to have access to some of these possibilities that you're laying out? And what I mean by that is, there was there was one time in particular where there was a pretty rare surgery that,
Mhm.
not everybody has access to. But Sandra said, if this is available, I want it, right? And
Yeah.
so she did what it took. I needed to go, to a different, health provider, a different set of doctors, hear the things that they say I need to do to be eligible for this surgery. And she did it. So, I think in terms of just you know, complying with the things that you are told to do, but also being, proactive in what other actions can I take that will
Mhm.
be better in the best position possible.
Yeah. Something else she told me, she said, there's power in having a big mouth and in not being afraid.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
think, like I said, to be proactive, she spoke up. When she heard possibility, she said, okay, sign
Yes.
me up. She also said, literally, step up, raise your hand, don't sit back in your own care.
Hmm.
So that's that. be a doer, take action, be your own advocate, I guess. And we're going to get to advocacy. And she told me that she told her oncology team to use her, use me,
Yes.
learn from me,
Yes.
whatever you can. And
Yes.
that gets, yeah, does that bring up something for you?
Definitely. I mean, that's what was great. She wasn't giving up and she was in this fight, but like she always felt like, what can I do? How can my fight benefit others? I guess is the
Mhm.
way to articulate it. So she did. She, used me. If there's an experiment that, something that's experimental, I'm game. I went with her to a second opinion that we did at Mayo here. And she told this guy, she said, okay, if it gets to the point where there is a clinical trial, I'm willing. If maybe it might not help me, but perhaps it'll help someone else. So she was willing to take those actions that not only were a benefit to her, but that could be of benefit to others.
Yeah, what a beautiful thing. So, advocacy, that next word that came to mind for really her key messages, she told me that she had outcomes she wanted to see. And one of the big ones was that she realized in her journey that there was a lack of representation of minorities in research. And she intended to be a voice to advocate for her community of specifically Black women to be educated about colon cancer, which goes
Yes.
back to awareness and
Yeah.
action for
Yes.
this. So, what else can you say about that?
Well, yes. I mean, as I said, she was very adamant about, how can I help people in general, right? From the experience that I'm going through. But, there was a recognition that, especially in those areas where there was things that were experimental, where, it was really critical that, that there was representation, broad representation in these trials that, these doctors acknowledged, we don't have the data that we would love to have from minority communities.
Mhm.
And so I think that really resonated with her and said, well, hey, I'm just one, but if I can contribute to improving that, I want to, sign me up if it becomes feasible to do. The things with clinical trial is it available at the time that it makes sense for you? Unfortunately, that particular one, it didn't come to be, but she was ready. She was ready to go if it were available. Um, and then also from an advocacy standpoint, advocating for others. But I would have to say that that's one of the areas that, my big takeaway from her was around how she advocated for herself throughout that journey. When I think about going from 2 years to 7, I really feel like her advocacy for herself had a major role in that outcome. I was always impressed with how she could rattle off her entire medical history at any given time. Medications that she took, the various surgeries she'd gone through, any of the challenges or the issues. I mean, she could rattle it off, and then if a doctor didn't get something right, she
Mm,
would correct them.
I love
Um,
it.
and she would challenge them. She didn't just take, what they said at face value without some challenge. And, that's the big mouth part.
That's a big mouth.
I saw it in action a few times. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, okay. But you know what? But she advocated for herself. And, if it made the doctors feel a little uncomfortable, then you know what? She was okay with that because this is about me. This is about my health, my life. And, she advocated in a way that I don't know that I've ever seen anybody in her particular, situation. And it's something that has definitely will always, stay with me, watching how she did that.
I love that. And I think the message for everyone is rather than have a victim mindset,
Mhm.
it's to take responsibility,
Mhm.
to be your own advocate,
That's
to be
right.
knowledgeable, and to oversee your own next steps, and to become knowledgeable about your disease and your
Right.
treatment, right?
Right. I mean, you alluded to the point when her team that had been with her, all of that,
Yeah.
all of those seven, almost 6.5 years or so, when they finally said we're at the end, she didn't take that. She did not take that answer. She was
Did
like, well,
not.
okay, if you guys are at the end, who can I find that's not? And
Yeah.
and guess what? She did find someone who said yes, and she was not ready to go and say, okay, well, here's where we are. She's like, if there is a possibility
Yeah.
that there's something that can come from this new team, I'm ready. And she went for it.
I love that. Well, let's let's get back to Auburn for a minute, because you're still very much involved at Auburn. I mean, when we were at Auburn, you became our president of Tigerettes, but now you're still very much involved on campus. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I am pretty involved. In fact, I just came back from a meeting with somebody from Auburn who was in town.
Oh,
But I think one of the primary things that I'm really proud of is that I was able to serve on the Auburn University Foundation Board. I finished my two 4-year terms at the end of this past year. And that was just an incredible experience, being able to give back in a different way, and to really be able to stay involved. And so from there, I am continuing to be involved. In fact, I'm one of our mutual Tigerette friends. I am on her Dean's Advisory Board in the College of Human Sciences. So that's another way I'm staying engaged. And I'm also going to be a lot more involved with the College of Engineering. So
yes.
I'm always looking for a reason to go to Auburn. And just a way to give back. I mean, education has kind of always been something that's really important. And we all go to the sporting events, and we do the fun stuff, but just looking for ways to really make Auburn better for the students, and the impact that that it can have. So I
I love
it's my happy place. It's people say, oh, you go to Auburn so much. I was like, but that's fun work.
that.
That's
Fun work.
that's hard work.
Yeah. Aw. And speaking of Auburn, in a way, Sandra is still giving back to Auburn too. So tell
Yes,
us about that, and
yes.
about that fund for Sandra and her parents.
Yes. So, I mean, this was probably one of her proudest moments. Is we had talked a little bit about like her legacy, and Auburn. Sandra loved Auburn as well. And I still will at times something will come up that's related to Auburn, and I'll go to text her because that's what we did, right? We always shared what was happening. So when she started thinking about her legacy and how she could, how it could make an impact, she decided to set up a scholarship, an endowed scholarship at Auburn. It's called the Curtis, Jessie, and Sandra Ingram Endowed Scholarship. And it's named after her and her parents, who her parents were, so beloved, and, had such an impact in her life that she wanted to make them a part of that legacy.
I love that. Dan, we've got a picture of Sandra at Auburn in the more recent years with Albie. Can we show that one? There she is, decked out, still loving Auburn.
That was
Thank
her
you.
last visit at Auburn, and this was
Was
last April.
Oh,
And
yeah.
again, that was one of those trips where she was determined to come back for that particular reunion as well.
Aw.
And this is the weekend that she, signed all the paperwork, and was able to get the scholarship established
Wow, that was April, and she passed in July.
in
So that's
July.
a thing. Thank you for showing that. So this I think that particular scholarship, you must be enrolled in the College of Liberal Arts and have declared a major in professional flight or aviation management and demonstrate financial needs. So what a beautiful way for her to give back. Sandra's own words posted on her Facebook page when announcing her mother's passing in 2019 were, and I quote, "She was truly the epitome of love, grace, and inclusion. Something we should all strive for. Be good out there, folks. We only have one chance at getting this right." End quote. Sandra, well said, my friend, well said. And you certainly were your mother's daughter, as you two were the epitome of love, grace, and inclusion, right? And in our session, Sandra had also revealed that she had a dream of writing a book, Sharlene. Had she shared that with you? Yeah.
We had.
And when I asked her what that key message would be, she said to not let things in life shut you down, things like a diagnosis. I asked her what the title would be of her book, and we shared a laugh because she said it would have to be something kind of cheeky. And when we were talking, yeah, something cheeky. And when we were talking about her diagnosis, she said, well, I sat on it for a while. So she was always making jokes about even her diagnosis near the end. But as we continued talking, she said something that stood out. And I said, Sandra, that's it. What you just said, that's it. That's the opening line of your book, at least. I said, you're already writing it. And what it was don't let someone else write your story.
I love that.
And I like this. So when it goes back to that awareness, action, advocacy, that's really what she was doing. She was writing her own story. So thank you, Sharlene, for joining me today to honor Sandra and to raise awareness for the importance of colon cancer and colon cancer screenings and everything that Sandra would want us to know and to be her voice today in her absence.
Thank you again. I'm very honored to have been a part of this, and I appreciate, the fact that you wanted to honor our dear friend. And I hope that, the messages that and what we've shared, can have an impact on someone. That would be her wish.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as we conclude this episode of Soul CPR, this very special one, I want all our listeners in this audience to remember that healing is not a linear journey. It is a process of profound transformation. And if today's stories resonated with you, to please share the podcast with those who may need a lifeline of their own, and subscribe, rate, and leave a review to help us reach more hearts. And you can connect with me on social media. On Facebook, it's Skyview Coaching, or on Instagram, Twitter, and X, it's at Ann Papayotti. You can let me know your thoughts, your stories, your ideas for future shows, and topics that we can discuss, or guests that we can bring on the show. So until next time, may you find strength in your vulnerability and courage in your journey, just as our dear friend Sandra did in hers. Thank you for listening. Breathe deeply, love openly, and live soulfully. And Bruce, I want to say thank you for loving our Sandra.
Yes.
Good day, everyone.
This has been Soul CPR with host Ann Papayotti. Breathe life back into your spirit with each episode, where she and special guests explore the relationships that hurt us and discover that healing can only begin with you. Tuesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network.